Question 1. When evaluating the implementation of IBM Case Manager V5, 1. Which approach best ensures that the solution effectively addresses the diverse needs and operational realities of all involved business units and end users, while also aligning with the strategic objectives of the executive sponsors? Option A. Conduct thorough stakeholder analysis to identify all relevant parties, actively solicit and document their specific requirements through workshops and interviews, and establish a clear communication plan to manage expectations and demonstrate progress throughout the implementation lifecycle. Option B. Solely rely on the vendor's recommended best practices for IBM Case Manager V5. 1. Assuming these will universally optimize case management processes across the organization. Option C. Prioritize the technical team's interpretation of requirements and the executive sponsor's high-level vision, assuming operational teams will adapt to the implemented system. Option D. Focus primarily on the immediate technical challenges and the executive sponsor's immediate directives, deferring detailed operational requirements until after the initial system deployment. The correct answer is C. Prioritize the technical team's interpretation of requirements and the executive sponsor's high-level vision, assuming operational teams will adapt to the implemented system. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise software implementation, particularly with a system like IBM Case Manager V5. 1. Which involves integrating with various existing business processes and systems. The core challenge lies in balancing the immediate needs and perspectives of different stakeholder groups, each with their own priorities and understanding of the system's capabilities and limitations. A failure to adequately consider the diverse stakeholder viewpoints can lead to misaligned expectations, scope creep, resistance to adoption, and ultimately, a solution that does not effectively address the business problem it was intended to solve. Careful judgment is required to synthesize these varied perspectives into a cohesive and actionable plan. The correct approach emphasizes a comprehensive and inclusive stakeholder engagement strategy. By actively involving all relevant parties from the outset, understanding their specific requirements, and managing their expectations through clear communication and demonstrable progress, the implementation team can build consensus and ensure the solution aligns with business objectives. This approach is best professional practice because it directly addresses the principles of effective project management and system implementation, which mandate understanding user needs and securing buy-in. It fosters transparency, reduces the risk of overlooking critical requirements, and promotes user adoption, all of which are crucial for the successful deployment of IBM Case Manager V5. 1. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the technical team's interpretation of requirements risks creating a system that is technically sound, but functionally inadequate for the business users. This fails to acknowledge the critical role of business process owners and end users in defining what constitutes a successful case management solution. Such an approach could lead to significant rework, user dissatisfaction, and a failure to achieve the desired business outcomes, potentially violating implicit agreements to deliver a business-enabling solution. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes only the executive sponsor's high-level vision, without detailed engagement with operational teams, can result in a solution that is misaligned with the day-to-day realities of case handling. This can lead to a system that is perceived as bureaucratic or inefficient by those who must use it, undermining its intended benefits and potentially leading to workarounds that bypass the system, negating the investment. This approach fails to meet the implicit ethical obligation to deliver a practical and effective tool for the intended users. A third incorrect approach that solely relies on vendor-provided best practices without thorough customization to the specific organizational context can lead to a generic solution that does not fully leverage the unique strengths or address the specific pain points of the organization. While vendor guidance is valuable, a truly effective IBM Case Manager V5 1 implementation requires tailoring to the specific business processes and stakeholder needs, ensuring the solution is not just implemented, but adopted and utilized effectively. This can lead to a suboptimal return on investment and a failure to meet the specific business case for implementing the system. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured stakeholder analysis to identify all relevant parties, their interests, and their influence. This should be followed by a robust requirements gathering process that actively solicits input from all identified stakeholders, using techniques like workshops, interviews, and prototyping. Continuous communication and feedback loops are essential to manage expectations and ensure alignment throughout the project lifecycle. A change management strategy that addresses user training and support is also critical for successful adoption. Question 2. Strategic planning requires a comprehensive approach to process optimization within IBM Case Manager V5. 1. Considering the need to enhance operational efficiency while maintaining strict adherence to regulatory requirements, which of the following strategies best represents a professional and compliant approach to optimizing case management workflows? Option A. Implement the latest third-party automation tools to accelerate case processing, assuming they will integrate seamlessly with existing compliance controls without prior validation. Option B. Modify critical process steps to improve speed, focusing on user experience improvements without consulting with legal or compliance departments to ensure regulatory alignment. Option C. Conduct a thorough review of existing case management processes, identifying bottlenecks and inefficiencies, and then evaluate potential optimization solutions that leverage IBM Case Manager V5's compliance and audit capabilities to ensure regulatory adherence. Option D. Prioritize the reduction of case cycle times by streamlining approval steps, even if it means simplifying audit trail logging for certain low-risk activities. The correct answer is D. Prioritize the reduction of case cycle times by streamlining approval steps, even if it means simplifying audit trail logging for certain low-risk activities. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in process optimization, where the immediate desire for efficiency might overlook critical compliance and governance requirements inherent in regulated industries. IBM Case Manager V5. 1. As a platform for managing complex business processes, operates within a framework where adherence to established procedures and regulatory mandates is paramount. The challenge lies in balancing the drive for streamlining operations with the non-negotiable need for auditability, data integrity, and adherence to industry-specific regulations, which are often implicitly or explicitly governed by frameworks like those relevant to financial services or healthcare, depending on the specific implementation context. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a holistic review that integrates process optimization with a thorough understanding of the existing regulatory landscape and IBM Case Manager V5's capabilities for enforcing compliance. This involves identifying bottlenecks and inefficiencies, while simultaneously assessing how proposed changes impact audit trails, data privacy, security controls, and adherence to any relevant industry-specific regulations. Best professional practice dictates that any optimization effort must first ensure it does not compromise compliance. IBM Case Manager V5's features for workflow management, rule enforcement, and audit logging are designed to support both efficiency and compliance, and leveraging these capabilities effectively is key. This approach aligns with the principle of compliance by design, ensuring that regulatory requirements are embedded into the optimized process from the outset, rather than being an afterthought. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach focuses solely on reducing cycle times without considering the impact on auditability. This is a regulatory failure because many regulated industries require detailed and immutable audit trails to demonstrate compliance with laws and internal policies. Compromising auditability can lead to significant penalties, reputational damage, and loss of trust. Another incorrect approach prioritizes the implementation of new, unproven technologies for optimization without validating their compatibility with IBM Case Manager V5's compliance features or the existing regulatory framework. This poses an ethical and regulatory risk by potentially introducing vulnerabilities, data integrity issues, or non-compliance with data handling regulations. A third incorrect approach involves making changes to critical process steps without consulting legal or compliance departments. This is a direct regulatory and ethical failure, as it bypasses essential governance mechanisms designed to ensure that business processes meet legal and regulatory obligations. Such an oversight can lead to unintentional breaches of contract, privacy laws, or industry-specific regulations. Professional reasoning. professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that begins with a clear understanding of the business objectives and the regulatory environment. This involves a risk-based assessment where potential process improvements are evaluated not only for their efficiency gains, but also for their impact on compliance, security, and data integrity. Collaboration with legal, compliance, and audit teams is essential throughout the optimization lifecycle. When using platforms like IBM Case Manager V5, 1. Professionals must leverage the platform's built-in governance and compliance features to support, rather than hinder, optimization efforts. The decision-making process should prioritize solutions that offer a demonstrable balance between operational efficiency and robust compliance. Question 3. Quality control measures reveal that IBM Case Manager V5.1 solutions are experiencing intermittent delays in case progression and task assignment, impacting operational efficiency. Which of the following diagnostic and resolution strategies is the most professionally sound and effective approach to address this implementation challenge? Option A. Immediately restart all IBM Case Manager services and related application server components to clear any potential transient issues. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of system logs, performance monitoring tools, and the specific case types exhibiting delays to identify patterns and potential bottlenecks within the IBM Case Manager configuration and its associated components. Option C. Focus initial troubleshooting efforts on external network infrastructure and user workstation performance, as these are common causes of application slowness. Option D. Implement a series of broad system patches and configuration changes across the IBM Case Manager environment based on recent vendor advisories, without specific diagnostic data. The correct answer is A. Immediately restart all IBM Case Manager services and related application server components to clear any potential transient issues. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge where a critical business process, managed by IBM Case Manager V5.1, is experiencing performance degradation. The challenge lies in identifying the root cause of the performance issues within a complex system, balancing the need for immediate resolution with the risk of introducing further instability. The pressure to restore service quickly can lead to hasty decisions, potentially overlooking crucial diagnostic steps or implementing suboptimal fixes. The professional challenge is to systematically diagnose the problem, considering all potential contributing factors within the IBM Case Manager V5.1 framework and its integrated components, while adhering to best practices for system stability and data integrity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic, phased investigation. This begins with gathering comprehensive diagnostic data, including system logs, performance metrics, and user feedback, to establish a baseline and identify specific symptoms. Next, it requires isolating the problem by examining individual components of the IBM Case Manager solution, such as the workflow engine, business rules, user interfaces, and underlying database. This methodical approach allows for the identification of the most probable cause without disrupting other parts of the system unnecessarily. Implementing a targeted fix based on this diagnosis, followed by rigorous testing in a non-production environment, and then a controlled rollout, minimizes the risk of further issues and ensures the integrity of the case management process. This aligns with general IT best practices for incident management and change control, emphasizing a data-driven and risk-aware methodology. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately restart services or apply broad system patches without a clear understanding of the root cause. This is professionally unacceptable because it is a shotgun approach that can mask the underlying problem, lead to unintended consequences, and potentially corrupt data or destabilize other system functions. It violates the principle of least privilege and controlled change, which are fundamental to maintaining system integrity and compliance with operational guidelines. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on external factors, such as network latency or user error, without thoroughly investigating the IBM Case Manager V5.1 configuration and its internal processing. This is professionally unsound, as it ignores the possibility of internal system defects or misconfigurations, which are often the primary drivers of performance issues within the application itself. It represents a failure to conduct a complete and thorough diagnostic, potentially leading to prolonged downtime and user dissatisfaction. A third incorrect approach is to implement a fix based on anecdotal evidence or assumptions without validating it through testing. This is professionally irresponsible, as it introduces a high risk of introducing new bugs or exacerbating existing problems. It bypasses essential quality assurance steps, which are critical for ensuring the reliability and stability of the case management system and maintaining user trust. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured problem-solving methodology. This involves 1. Clearly defining the problem and its impact. 2. Gathering all relevant data and performing a thorough analysis. 3. Formulating hypotheses about potential causes. 4. Testing these hypotheses systematically. 5. Implementing the most likely solution in a controlled manner. And 6. Verifying the resolution and documenting the process. This approach ensures that decisions are data-driven, risks are mitigated, and the most effective and stable solution is implemented, thereby upholding professional standards of care and system reliability. Question 4. Process analysis reveals that a critical business requirement for a new IBM Case Manager v5.1 implementation necessitates the migration of historical case data from a legacy system. A team member suggests bypassing the formal data governance review and approval process for accessing this historical data, arguing that it will significantly accelerate the project timeline. The team member proposes either directly accessing the legacy database to extract the data or having a junior team member perform the extraction using shared credentials, as the data is considered old and less sensitive. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound approach to address this situation? Option A. Proceed with the direct extraction of historical data from the legacy system by the team member, as the data is considered old and the urgency of the project outweighs the formal review process. Option B. Initiate a formal request through the established data governance channels to access and migrate the historical data, ensuring all necessary approvals and security protocols are followed, even if it impacts the immediate timeline. Option C. Authorize a junior team member to access the legacy system using shared credentials to extract the data, with the understanding that they will handle it with care. Option D. Create a temporary, unsecured export of the raw historical data into a shared document for immediate use, with a plan to secure it later once the new system is live. The correct answer is B. Initiate a formal request through the established data governance channels to access and migrate the historical data, ensuring all necessary approvals and security protocols are followed, even if it impacts the immediate timeline. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a classic ethical dilemma in a regulated environment, specifically concerning data privacy and the potential for misuse of sensitive information within a case management system. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate business need for access to historical data with the long-term implications of potential privacy breaches and regulatory noncompliance. The pressure to deliver a solution quickly, coupled with the temptation to bypass established protocols, creates a high-stakes decision point for the case manager. The core of the challenge is recognizing that expediency should not override fundamental ethical and legal obligations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes adherence to the established data governance policies and regulatory frameworks governing data privacy. This involves formally requesting access to the historical data through the documented channels, which typically include a review and approval process by a data governance committee or a designated privacy officer. This process ensures that any access granted is necessary, proportionate, and compliant with relevant regulations, such as those pertaining to the protection of personally identifiable information, PI, or sensitive client data. By following the established protocol, the case manager upholds professional integrity, demonstrates a commitment to data security, and mitigates the risk of regulatory penalties and reputational damage. This approach aligns with the principle of least privilege and ensures that data access is auditable and accountable. Correct approaches analysis. Accessing the historical data directly from the legacy system without proper authorization or a formal request bypasses critical security and privacy controls. This action constitutes a direct violation of data governance policies and potentially regulatory requirements related to data access and handling. It creates an unauthorized access point, leaving the organization vulnerable to data breaches and audit failures. Sharing the legacy system credentials with a junior team member to extract the data, even with the intention of expediting the process, is also a serious ethical and regulatory lapse. This action constitutes a delegation of responsibility for sensitive data handling, without ensuring the junior member has the necessary training, authorization, or understanding of data privacy obligations. It increases the risk of accidental data exposure or misuse and violates principles of accountability and proper oversight. Creating a temporary workaround that involves exporting raw data into an unsecured format, such as a shared spreadsheet, without anonymization or encryption, is highly problematic. This exposes sensitive client information to a significant risk of unauthorized access, modification, or theft. It directly contravenes data protection regulations that mandate secure storage and transmission of personal data, and demonstrates a severe disregard for data confidentiality and integrity. Professional reasoning. Professionals in regulated environments must adopt a decision-making process that begins with identifying all relevant stakeholders and their interests, including clients, the organization, and regulatory bodies. The next step is to identify all applicable laws, regulations, and internal policies. In this case, data privacy laws and internal data governance policies are paramount. Professionals should then evaluate potential courses of action against these frameworks, considering the ethical implications and potential consequences of each. When faced with pressure to deviate from established procedures, it is crucial to advocate for adherence to compliance requirements, even if it means a slight delay. If the established process is perceived as a bottleneck, the professional should initiate a discussion about improving the process, rather than circumventing it. This involves clear communication, documentation of decisions, and seeking guidance from legal or compliance departments when uncertainty arises. Question 5. Process analysis reveals that a new IBM Case Manager v5.1 solution has been developed with advanced technical capabilities but lacks integrated user training modules and a formal feedback loop for end users post-deployment. The project team is eager to go live to meet an upcoming deadline. Which approach best balances immediate deployment needs with long-term system success and user adoption? Option A. Deploy the system with a focus on advanced features, assuming users will adapt quickly, and provide extensive post-deployment support through the IT help desk. Option B. Delay the deployment to develop comprehensive, interactive user training modules and establish a dedicated feedback portal before the go-live date. Option C. Implement the solution with minimal, ad hoc user guidance and rely on informal channels for feedback. Planning to iterate based on emergent issues. Option D. Proceed with the deployment as planned, focusing on a quick go-live to meet the deadline, and address user training and feedback issues in a subsequent phase. Correct answer is D. Proceed with the deployment as planned, focusing on a quick go-live to meet the deadline, and address user training and feedback issues in a subsequent phase. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in case management implementation where a proposed solution, while technically functional, may not align with established best practices for user adoption and long-term system maintainability. The pressure to deliver a functional system quickly can lead to overlooking critical aspects of user experience and governance, which are paramount for successful case management. The professional challenge lies in balancing immediate project demands with the strategic imperative of creating a sustainable and user-friendly solution that adheres to organizational policies and industry best practices. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a phased rollout with comprehensive user training and feedback mechanisms. This aligns with best practices in change management and system implementation. By involving end users early and often, providing adequate training, and establishing clear feedback loops, the organization increases the likelihood of user adoption and reduces resistance to change. This approach also allows for iterative refinement of the solution based on real-world usage, ensuring that the final implementation is both effective and efficient. From a regulatory and ethical standpoint, this approach promotes transparency, accountability, and user empowerment, which are often implicit or explicit requirements in organizational governance and data handling policies. It minimizes the risk of system misuse or underutilization due to a lack of understanding or buy-in. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves deploying the system without adequate user training or a structured feedback mechanism. This directly contravenes best practices for user adoption and system integration. Ethically, it can lead to frustration, errors, and potential data integrity issues if users are not properly equipped to use the system. It also fails to uphold the organization's responsibility to its employees by not providing the necessary tools and support for them to perform their duties effectively. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize technical perfection over user accessibility and ease of use, leading to a complex interface that is difficult for end users to navigate. This ignores the fundamental principle that a case management system must be usable by its intended audience to be effective. Regulatory and ethical implications include potential noncompliance if the complexity leads to errors in data entry or process execution, and a failure to provide a fair and equitable working environment for all users. A third incorrect approach is to bypass established change management protocols and deploy the solution without proper stakeholder communication and buy-in. This can foster distrust, create silos, and undermine the overall success of the case management initiative. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of respect for the contributions and concerns of stakeholders and can lead to a perception of a top-down, unsupportive implementation process. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes user-centric design, robust training, and continuous feedback. This involves understanding the end user's workflows, anticipating potential challenges, and building a system that is intuitive and supportive. Critical step is to engage stakeholders early and maintain open lines of communication throughout the implementation lifecycle. When evaluating proposed solutions, professionals should ask, does this solution empower our users? And does it align with our long-term strategic goals for efficiency and compliance? The focus should always be on delivering value not just through technology, but through successful adoption and integration into daily operations. Question 6. The audit findings indicate that a significant number of complex cases are being resolved without a clear, documented rationale for bypassing the standard escalation procedures, leading to concerns about consistency and compliance. Which of the following best describes the most appropriate decision-making approach in this scenario, considering the need for both efficiency and regulatory adherence within the IBM Case Manager v5? 1 framework. Option A. Delay the decision to escalate complex cases until the case reaches a critical point where immediate intervention is unavoidable, thereby minimizing the perceived administrative burden of early escalation. Option B. Rely on the experience and discretion of senior case managers to identify and bypass escalation for cases they deem straightforward, without requiring formal documentation of their reasoning. Option C. Implement a structured decision-making framework that defines objective criteria for case complexity and outlines a clear, documented process for determining when standard escalation can be bypassed, ensuring all such decisions are logged within the case management system. Option D. Escalate every case that exhibits any characteristic of complexity to a higher authority, regardless of whether it meets predefined escalation thresholds, to ensure maximum oversight. The correct answer is C. Implement a structured decision-making framework that defines objective criteria for case complexity and outlines a clear, documented process for determining when standard escalation can be bypassed, ensuring all such decisions are logged within the case management system. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential deviation from established decision-making frameworks within the case management process, specifically concerning the escalation of complex cases. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for efficient case resolution with the imperative to ensure thoroughness and adherence to regulatory compliance, especially when dealing with sensitive or high-risk situations. The pressure to meet performance metrics can sometimes lead to shortcuts that, while seemingly expedient, may compromise the integrity of the decision-making process and expose the organization to regulatory scrutiny. The correct approach, which involves a structured decision-making framework that prioritizes objective criteria and documented rationale for escalation, represents best professional practice. This aligns with the principles of good governance and risk management, ensuring that decisions are not arbitrary but are based on a clear understanding of case complexity and potential impact. In the context of IBM Case Manager v5, 1. This translates to leveraging the system's capabilities for defining escalation rules, documenting decision points, and maintaining an audit trail. This methodical approach minimizes the risk of overlooking critical factors, ensures consistency in decision-making, and provides a defensible record in case of review or dispute, thereby upholding regulatory compliance and ethical standards. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the subjective judgment of the case manager, without a defined framework or documentation, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This can lead to inconsistent application of escalation policies, potential bias, and an inability to demonstrate due diligence. Such an approach fails to meet the requirements for accountability and transparency expected by regulatory bodies. Another incorrect approach, which involves escalating all complex cases regardless of specific criteria, is inefficient and can overwhelm resources, leading to delays in resolving genuinely critical issues. This demonstrates a lack of nuanced judgment and an inability to effectively apply decision-making logic, potentially violating service-level agreements and operational efficiency mandates. A third incorrect approach, which involves delaying escalation until a crisis point is reached, is a clear failure in proactive risk management and can result in severe consequences, including regulatory penalties and reputational damage. This demonstrates a reactive rather than a proactive decision-making posture, which is unacceptable in regulated environments. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that includes clearly defined criteria for case assessment, a documented process for evaluating these criteria, and a transparent escalation path. This framework should be integrated into the case management system, enabling consistent application and providing an audit trail. When faced with complex decisions, professionals should ask, does this decision align with our established policies and procedures? Is there sufficient documentation to support this decision? What are the potential risks and consequences of this decision, and have they been adequately addressed? Does this decision uphold our ethical obligations and regulatory requirements? Question 7. Market research demonstrates that a competitor has successfully deployed a new case management solution, leading to a perceived competitive advantage. Your organization is eager to implement IBM Case Manager V5, one rapidly to achieve similar benefits, which approach best balances the urgency of market demands with the imperative of responsible system deployment. Option A. Delay the IBM Case Manager V5, one implementation until a comprehensive pre-implementation impact assessment is completed, even if it means missing the immediate market window. Option B. Proceed with a phased rollout of IBM Case Manager V5. 1. Focusing on core functionalities first, while conducting a concurrent, iterative impact assessment for each phase. Option C. Immediately initiate a full-scale deployment of IBM Case Manager V5, 1 across all departments, assuming that any unforeseen impacts can be addressed reactively post-implementation. Option D. Delegate the impact assessment to the implementation vendor, trusting their standard deployment methodology without internal validation. Correct answer is B. Proceed with a phased rollout of IBM Case Manager V5. 1. Focusing on core functionalities first, while conducting a concurrent, iterative impact assessment for each phase. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise software implementation, balancing the desire for rapid deployment with the necessity of thorough impact assessment. The professional challenge lies in managing stakeholder expectations, resource allocation, and risk mitigation effectively. A rushed implementation without proper impact assessment can lead to unforeseen disruptions, increased costs, and failure to meet business objectives, potentially violating regulatory compliance if the system handles sensitive data or critical business processes. The correct approach, which involves a comprehensive impact assessment before proceeding with the full deployment of IBM Case Manager V5. 1. Represents best professional practice. This aligns with established project management methodologies and regulatory principles that emphasize due diligence and risk management. A thorough assessment ensures that all potential consequences, technical, operational, financial, and regulatory, are identified and addressed. This proactive stance minimizes the likelihood of negative outcomes and maximizes the chances of a successful, compliant implementation. It demonstrates a commitment to responsible system deployment, safeguarding against potential data breaches, operational failures, and noncompliance with relevant industry standards or data protection laws. An incorrect approach that bypasses or significantly shortens the impact assessment phase is professionally unacceptable due to several regulatory and ethical failures. Firstly, it demonstrates a disregard for risk management principles, which are often implicitly or explicitly mandated by regulatory frameworks governing data security and operational integrity. For instance, If the case management system handles personal data, failing to assess the impact on data privacy could lead to violations of data protection regulations, resulting in fines and reputational damage. Secondly, it can lead to a failure to meet service-level agreements or operational requirements, which could have contractual and regulatory implications, especially in regulated industries. Thirdly, it shows a lack of due diligence in understanding the system's integration points and dependencies, potentially causing downstream failures that impact compliance with business continuity or disaster recovery regulations. Ethically, it prioritizes speed over the well-being of the organization, its customers, and its employees by exposing them to unnecessary risks. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach to risk assessment and impact analysis. This includes clearly defining the scope of the impact assessment, identifying all relevant stakeholders and their concerns, systematically evaluating potential impacts across technical, operational, financial, and regulatory domains, developing mitigation strategies for identified risks, and obtaining formal sign-off from key stakeholders before proceeding with major implementation phases. This iterative process ensures that decisions are informed, risks are managed, and compliance is maintained throughout the project lifecycle. Question 8. The risk matrix shows that performance degradation in the loan origination case type poses a high risk to customer satisfaction and regulatory compliance. A team is tasked with investigating the issue within the IBM Case Manager v5.1 environment. Which of the following approaches is the most effective for diagnosing the root cause of the performance problem? Option A. Implement a series of broad, unverified configuration changes across the IBM Case Manager application and its supporting infrastructure to see if any resolve the issue. Option B. Systematically analyze IBM Case Manager's diagnostic logs, performance dashboards, and audit trails, correlating findings with the reported symptoms and recent system changes. Option C. Immediately begin optimizing the underlying database server, assuming it is the primary bottleneck for all case management operations. Option D. Focus exclusively on gathering more anecdotal feedback from end users to understand their perceived slowdowns. The correct answer is C. Immediately begin optimizing the underlying database server, assuming it is the primary bottleneck for all case management operations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise content management where a critical business process, the loan origination case type, is experiencing performance degradation. The challenge lies in identifying the root cause of this degradation within the IBM Case Manager v5.1 environment, which involves multiple interconnected components and potential points of failure. The risk matrix, by highlighting the potential impact of system performance on customer satisfaction and regulatory compliance, underscores the urgency and importance of a systematic and thorough investigation. Misdiagnosing the issue could lead to wasted resources, prolonged downtime, and potential breaches of service-level agreements, SLAs, or regulatory requirements related to timely processing of financial applications. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured, data-driven investigation that begins with understanding the scope and symptoms of the problem. This includes gathering detailed information about the specific symptoms, e.g., slow case loading, delayed task assignment, the affected users and case types, and any recent changes to the environment. The next critical step is to leverage IBM Case Manager's built-in diagnostic tools and logs, such as the System Health Dashboard, audit logs, and application server logs, to pinpoint the source of the performance bottleneck. This systematic approach, focusing on empirical evidence and system diagnostics, aligns with best practices for IT incident management and problem resolution, ensuring that interventions are targeted and effective. It also implicitly supports regulatory compliance by aiming to restore system functionality promptly, thereby minimizing any potential impact on regulated processes like loan origination. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately assume the issue is with the underlying database without sufficient evidence. While database performance can impact IBM Case Manager, jumping to this conclusion without analyzing case manager-specific logs and performance metrics can lead to misdirected efforts and delay the actual resolution. This bypasses the structured diagnostic process and could result in unnecessary database tuning or infrastructure changes, failing to address the true root cause within the application layer. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on user feedback without correlating it with system-level data. The user experience is important. Anecdotal evidence alone is insufficient for diagnosing complex system performance issues. Without examining system logs, performance counters, and diagnostic tools, it's impossible to objectively determine if the problem lies with the application, network, or user workstations. This approach risks making assumptions that are not supported by factual data, potentially leading to ineffective solutions. A third incorrect approach is to implement broad, untested changes to the IBM case manager configuration or underlying infrastructure without a clear hypothesis or diagnostic findings. This shotgun approach is highly risky, as it could introduce new problems, exacerbate existing ones, or have unintended consequences on other case types or system functionalities. It violates the principle of controlled change management and lacks the systematic problem-solving rigor required for enterprise systems. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a scenario should employ a structured problem-solving framework. This typically involves 1. Problem identification. Clearly define the symptoms, scope, and impact of the issue. 2. Information gathering. Collect all relevant data including user reports, system logs, performance metrics, and recent change records. 3. Hypothesis generation. Based on the gathered information, formulate plausible explanations for the problem. 4. Testing and diagnosis. Use diagnostic tools and techniques to validate or refute hypotheses. This is where leveraging IBM Case Manager's specific diagnostic capabilities is crucial. 5. Solution implementation. Once the root cause is identified, implement a targeted solution. 6. Verification and monitoring. Confirm the issue is resolved and monitor the system to prevent recurrence. This systematic, evidence-based approach ensures efficient and effective problem resolution, minimizes risk, and upholds professional standards for system management and support. Question 9. Operational review demonstrates that the current implementation of IBM Case Manager v5.1 has been in place for several years, and while it is functioning, there is a growing concern about potential security vulnerabilities and adherence to evolving data privacy regulations. The IT department has proposed a comprehensive risk assessment to identify and mitigate these concerns before any major system upgrades are considered. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional best practices for conducting this risk assessment? Option A. Conduct a detailed analysis of the system's workflow configurations, security settings, audit trails, and data access controls within IBM Case Manager v5. 1. Cross-referencing potential weaknesses against known regulatory requirements for data handling and privacy. Option B. Gather informal feedback from a select group of long-term users and administrators regarding any perceived issues or concerns with the system's security and compliance. Option C. Focus the risk assessment primarily on measuring the system's current processing speed and user interface responsiveness to ensure optimal end-user experience. Option D. Prioritize the immediate implementation of planned new features and modules for IBM Case Manager v5. 1. Deferring any in-depth risk assessment until after the new functionalities are deployed. The correct answer is A. Conduct a detailed analysis of the system's workflow configurations, security settings, audit trails, and data access controls within IBM Case Manager v5. 1. Cross-referencing potential weaknesses against known regulatory requirements for data handling and privacy. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for efficient case management with the imperative to conduct a thorough and compliant risk assessment. The challenge lies in identifying potential vulnerabilities within the IBM Case Manager v5. One implementation that could lead to regulatory noncompliance or operational failures, without introducing undue delays or unnecessary complexity. The chosen approach must align with the principles of risk management, as understood within the context of the C2070-586 exam's implied jurisdiction, which focuses on the responsible implementation and oversight of case management systems. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it systematically identifies, analyzes, and prioritizes risks based on their potential impact and likelihood. This aligns with general principles of good governance and operational due diligence, ensuring that potential issues are addressed proactively. By focusing on the specific functionalities and configurations of IBM Case Manager v5. 1. such as workflow design, security settings, and data handling. This approach ensures that the risk assessment is relevant and actionable. It also implicitly supports the need for ongoing monitoring and adaptation, which are critical for maintaining compliance and operational integrity in a dynamic environment. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the technical performance metrics of the system, such as response times or throughput, fails to adequately address the regulatory and business risks. While performance is important, it does not directly assess the potential for data breaches, unauthorized access, or procedural deviations that could lead to regulatory penalties or reputational damage. This approach overlooks the core purpose of risk assessment in ensuring compliance and safeguarding organizational assets. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes the implementation of new features over a comprehensive risk assessment is also professionally unacceptable. While innovation is valuable, it must not come at the expense of understanding and mitigating existing or newly introduced risks. This approach demonstrates a disregard for due diligence and could lead to the deployment of a system with unaddressed vulnerabilities, potentially violating regulatory requirements for system security and data integrity. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a few key stakeholders without a structured methodology is insufficient. Risk assessment requires a systematic and objective evaluation. Relying on informal feedback can lead to biased conclusions and the overlooking of critical risks that may not be immediately apparent to all individuals. This approach lacks the rigor necessary for effective risk management and compliance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This typically includes identifying potential risks relevant to the system and its operational context, analyzing the likelihood and impact of each identified risk, evaluating existing controls and their effectiveness, prioritizing risks based on their severity, and developing mitigation strategies. This systematic approach ensures that all significant risks are considered and addressed in a prioritized manner, aligning with both operational efficiency and regulatory compliance objectives. Question 10. The audit findings indicate that a case manager has consistently applied a modified decision-making process for a specific type of case, deviating from the documented framework without explicit approval or documented justification for the exception. The case manager believes this modification leads to more efficient outcomes. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Continue applying the modified process as it is perceived to be more efficient, assuming that efficiency justifies the deviation from the documented framework. Option B. Immediately revert to the documented framework for all cases, without seeking to understand if the modified process has any merit or potential for future formal adoption. Option C. Ignore the audit finding and continue with the modified process, as the case manager believes it is beneficial and has not resulted in any immediate negative consequences. Option D. Immediately seek formal approval for the modified process, providing detailed justification and evidence of its effectiveness, while continuing to follow the established framework for all other cases until approval is granted. The correct answer is D. Immediately seek formal approval for the modified process, providing detailed justification and evidence of its effectiveness, while continuing to follow the established framework for all other cases until approval is granted. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for efficient case resolution with the imperative to adhere to established regulatory frameworks and internal governance. The audit findings highlight a potential deviation from expected process, necessitating a decision on how to address the discrepancy without compromising compliance or client trust. The core of the challenge lies in interpreting the intent and scope of the decision-making framework as it applies to exceptions and ensuring that any deviation is justified, documented, and approved according to established protocols. Correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to the established decision-making framework and regulatory guidelines. By seeking clarification and formal approval for an exception, the professional demonstrates a commitment to transparency, accountability, and compliance. This aligns with the principles of good governance and risk management, ensuring that any deviation from standard procedure is understood, approved, and documented, thereby mitigating potential regulatory or audit issues. This proactive stance protects both the individual and the organization. An incorrect approach that involves unilaterally overriding the framework without proper justification or approval fails to uphold regulatory requirements. Such an action could be interpreted as a breach of internal policy and potentially external regulations if the framework is designed to meet specific compliance standards. It bypasses necessary checks and balances, creating a risk of inconsistent application of rules and potentially leading to unfair outcomes for clients or stakeholders. This lack of documented justification and approval can result in significant audit findings and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, such as ignoring the audit finding and continuing with the established practice without addressing the discrepancy, is professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a disregard for internal controls and audit processes, which are critical for maintaining operational integrity and compliance. It suggests a lack of diligence and a failure to engage with feedback mechanisms designed to improve processes and ensure adherence to standards. This can lead to systemic issues going unaddressed, increasing the organization's exposure to risk. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Understand the audit finding. Clearly comprehend the nature of the discrepancy identified by the audit. 2. Consult the framework. Review the relevant decision-making framework and any associated policies or guidelines. 3. Assess the impact. Evaluate the potential consequences of the deviation on case outcomes, compliance, and organizational risk. 4. Seek clarification/guidance. If the framework's application is unclear or an exception is genuinely needed, consult with supervisors, compliance officers, or legal counsel. 5. Document and justify. If an exception is deemed necessary, thoroughly document the rationale and obtain formal approval. 6. Implement and monitor. Ensure the approved course of action is implemented and monitor its effectiveness. Question 11. The assessment process reveals that a key client has requested the permanent deletion of specific case data from the IBM Case Manager v5.1 system, citing data minimization and privacy concerns. However, internal records indicate that this same data is currently subject to an active legal hold due to ongoing litigation. The system administrator is tasked with fulfilling the client's request while ensuring compliance with all relevant legal and regulatory obligations. Which of the following actions represents the most appropriate professional response to this situation? Option A. Immediately proceed with the permanent deletion of the requested case data, as client requests for data minimization should be prioritized to ensure privacy compliance. Option B. Halt any deletion activities and immediately consult with the legal department to confirm the status and scope of the legal hold before taking any further action. Option C. Inform the client that their request cannot be fulfilled due to system limitations and proceed with standard data archival procedures. Option D. Attempt to delete the data from the primary system while retaining a separate, unsearchable backup copy to satisfy the legal hold. Correct answer is A. Immediately proceed with the permanent deletion of the requested case data, as client requests for data minimization should be prioritized to ensure privacy compliance. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in managing sensitive customer data within an IBM Case Manager v5.1 environment, specifically concerning data retention and deletion policies. The core difficulty lies in balancing regulatory compliance, business needs for data access, and the technical capabilities of the system. The client's request to permanently delete data that is still subject to a legal hold introduces a direct conflict between operational efficiency and legal obligations, requiring careful judgment to avoid severe repercussions. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves prioritizing the legal hold directive over the client's immediate deletion request. This aligns with the principle of preserving evidence for legal proceedings, a fundamental requirement in many regulatory frameworks. In the context of IBM Case Manager, this would translate to ensuring that the data marked for legal hold is not purged by any automated or manual processes until the hold is officially lifted by the legal department. This upholds the integrity of the legal process and prevents obstruction of justice, which carries significant regulatory and ethical weight. Best professional practice dictates adherence to legal mandates, even when they conflict with client desires or operational convenience. Incorrect approaches analysis. Proceeding with the client's request to permanently delete the data without verifying the status of the legal hold would constitute a severe regulatory and ethical failure. This action could be interpreted as spoliation of evidence, leading to legal penalties, fines, and reputational damage for both the organization and the individuals involved. It demonstrates a disregard for legal obligations and a failure to implement proper data governance controls. Another incorrect approach would be to simply ignore the client's request and leave the data in place without proper communication or explanation. While this avoids the immediate risk of data deletion, it fails to address the client's stated business need and can lead to dissatisfaction and potential escalation. It also doesn't actively manage the situation, leaving the data in a state of uncertainty regarding its eventual disposition. A third incorrect approach might be to attempt to delete the data while simultaneously attempting to mask it or make it inaccessible, believing this satisfies both the client and the legal hold. This is a flawed strategy as it does not guarantee the data is truly unrecoverable and could still be considered an attempt to circumvent the legal hold, leading to similar negative consequences as outright deletion. Professional reasoning. Professionals encountering such a conflict should follow a structured decision-making process. 1. Identify the conflicting requirements. Recognize the tension between the client's request and the legal hold. 2. Consult relevant policies and regulations. Review internal data retention policies, legal hold procedures, and applicable regulatory guidelines. 3. Engage legal counsel. Immediately involve the legal department to clarify the scope and duration of the legal hold and to obtain explicit instructions. 4. Document all communications and actions. Maintain a clear record of the client's request, the legal hold status, and all decisions made. 5. Prioritize legal obligations. Ensure that legal holds are respected above all else until formally released. 6. Communicate transparently. Inform the client about the inability to fulfill their request due to the legal hold and provide an estimated timeline for resolution once the hold is lifted. 7. Implement system controls. Utilize IBM Case Manager's features to ensure data subject to a legal hold is protected from deletion. Question 12. The evaluation methodology shows that a critical business requirement for the financial services organization is to ensure that all case data, including sensitive customer information, is managed in accordance with strict data retention and privacy regulations. The current IBM Case Manager v5.1 implementation is experiencing performance degradation due to the accumulation of historical case data. The project team is considering several approaches to address this issue while maintaining compliance. Which approach best balances performance, data integrity, and regulatory adherence? Option A. Retain all case data indefinitely within the active IBM Case Manager v5.1 database to ensure complete historical record availability, regardless of performance impact or regulatory retention limits. Option B. Manually export all historical case data to individual spreadsheets for offline storage, and then delete the data from the IBM Case Manager v5.1 system. Option C. Configure IBM Case Manager v5.1 to automatically delete all case data older than 2 years to improve system performance, without establishing a separate archiving process or audit log. Option D. Implement a comprehensive data archiving strategy within IBM Case Manager v5.1 that moves inactive case data to a secure, long-term storage solution, with automated deletion of data that has exceeded its legally defined retention period, supported by an audit trail. Correct answer is D. Implement a comprehensive data archiving strategy within IBM Case Manager v5.1 that moves inactive case data to a secure, long-term storage solution, with automated deletion of data that has exceeded its legally defined retention period, supported by an audit trail. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to the implementation of IBM Case Manager v5.1, specifically concerning the management of case data and its adherence to regulatory requirements. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for efficient case processing with the imperative to maintain data integrity and comply with data retention policies. A careful judgment is required to select an approach that is both technically sound and legally compliant. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes data integrity and regulatory compliance. By implementing a robust data archiving strategy that is aligned with the defined retention policies, the organization ensures that sensitive case data is handled appropriately. This proactive measure mitigates the risk of non-compliance with data protection regulations, such as those that might govern the storage and disposal of personal or financial information, by ensuring data is only retained for the legally mandated period and then securely disposed of or archived. This aligns with principles of data minimization and responsible data lifecycle management. An incorrect approach that involves simply deleting old case data without a proper archiving or audit trail mechanism fails to meet regulatory requirements. This could lead to violations of data retention laws, which mandate specific periods for keeping records. Such an action would also compromise auditability, making it impossible to reconstruct case histories if required for legal or investigative purposes. Another incorrect approach, which is to retain all case data indefinitely without a defined life cycle, also presents significant regulatory risks. This can lead to excessive storage costs, increased vulnerability to data breaches due to a larger attack surface, and potential noncompliance with data privacy regulations that grant individuals rights to have their data deleted after a certain period. Furthermore, it hinders efficient data retrieval and analysis. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the applicable regulatory framework, including data retention laws and privacy regulations. This should be followed by an assessment of the technical capabilities of IBM Case Manager v5. 1. To support these requirements, a risk-based approach is crucial, identifying potential compliance gaps and developing mitigation strategies. Collaboration with legal and compliance teams is essential to ensure that the chosen solution aligns with all legal obligations and ethical considerations. Finally, ongoing monitoring and periodic review of the data management strategy are necessary to adapt to evolving regulations and business needs. Question 13. Risk assessment procedures indicate that the current IBM Case Manager v5.1 implementation requires significant updates to improve user efficiency and address emerging data governance mandates. Which of the following approaches best balances the need for modernization with the absolute priority of maintaining regulatory compliance and audit trail integrity? Option A. Outsource the entire modernization effort to a third-party vendor without establishing clear compliance checkpoints or involving internal legal and compliance teams in the review of proposed changes. Option B. Conduct a phased approach to system updates, prioritizing changes based on their impact on critical business functions and regulatory compliance requirements, with thorough testing and validation at each stage. Option C. Implement a comprehensive suite of user interface enhancements and workflow optimizations across all case types simultaneously, deferring detailed data structure reviews until after the initial rollout. Option D. Focus exclusively on migrating to a newer version of IBM Case Manager, without a detailed analysis of existing custom configurations and their compliance implications, assuming the newer version will automatically resolve all issues. The correct answer is C. Implement a comprehensive suite of user interface enhancements and workflow optimizations across all case types simultaneously, deferring detailed data structure reviews until after the initial rollout. Explanation: this scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise content management, where the initial implementation of a case management system, IBM Case Manager v5.1, is not fully aligned with evolving business needs and regulatory expectations. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for system modernization and improved user experience with the imperative to maintain compliance with established data governance and audit trail requirements. A hasty or incomplete approach to updating the system risks introducing new vulnerabilities or failing to address existing ones, potentially leading to regulatory noncompliance and operational inefficiencies. The correct approach emphasizes a phased, risk-based strategy that prioritizes critical functionalities and compliance requirements. This involves thorough impact analysis, robust testing, and clear communication with stakeholders. By systematically evaluating each component of the case management solution, identifying dependencies, and ensuring that all changes are validated against regulatory frameworks and business objectives, the organization can mitigate risks effectively. This methodical process ensures that the updated system not only meets current needs, but also maintains the integrity of historical data and audit trails, which are paramount for regulatory compliance and internal governance. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on superficial user interface improvements, without a deep dive into the underlying data structures and workflow logic, would be professionally unacceptable. This would likely lead to the introduction of new data integrity issues or the inadvertent compromise of audit trails, directly violating principles of data governance and potentially contravening regulations that mandate accurate and complete record keeping. Another incorrect approach, such as implementing a big bang upgrade without adequate testing or rollback plans, exposes the organization to significant operational disruption and compliance risks. This demonstrates a failure to adhere to best practices in change management and risk mitigation, which are fundamental to maintaining a stable and compliant IT environment. A third incorrect approach, neglecting to involve legal and compliance teams in the review process, represents a critical ethical and regulatory oversight. This failure to seek expert guidance on compliance implications can result in the deployment of a system that inadvertently violates specific industry regulations or data privacy laws, leading to severe penalties and reputational damage. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the current system's limitations and the desired future state. This involves engaging all relevant stakeholders, including IT, business units, legal, and compliance. A thorough risk assessment should then inform the prioritization of changes, focusing on areas with the highest potential impact on compliance and business operations. Each proposed change should be evaluated for its impact on data integrity, auditability, and adherence to relevant regulations. A phased implementation with rigorous testing and validation at each stage, coupled with clear documentation and communication, is essential for successful and compliant system evolution. Question 14. Assessment of the implementation strategy for IBM Case Manager v5. 1. Considering the organization's obligation to comply with data protection regulations concerning personally identifiable information (PI) and sensitive data requires a careful balance. Which of the following approaches best ensures regulatory compliance and minimizes risk? Option A. Conducting a comprehensive data protection impact assessment (DPIA) prior to and during the IBM Case Manager v5. 1. Implementation to identify and mitigate data privacy risks and configuring the system with privacy by design principles. Option B. Implementing IBM Case Manager v5. 1. With standard security configurations and addressing data privacy concerns only if specific regulatory audit findings arise post-deployment. Option C. Relying solely on the default security features of IBM Case Manager v5. 1. Assuming they inherently meet all applicable data protection laws without further specific analysis or configuration. Option D. Deferring all data privacy and security configuration for IBM Case Manager v5. 1. Until after the initial go-live, focusing solely on functional deployment first. Correct answer is A. Conducting a comprehensive data protection impact assessment (DPIA) prior to and during the IBM Case Manager v5. 1. Implementation to identify and mitigate data privacy risks and configuring the system with privacy by design principles. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to regulatory compliance in the context of implementing IBM Case Manager v5. 1. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for efficient case processing with the stringent requirements of data privacy regulations, specifically those pertaining to personally identifiable information, PI, and sensitive data. The organization is under pressure to deliver a new case management solution, but failing to adequately address data protection can lead to severe legal penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. The challenge is to ensure that the technical implementation of IBM Case Manager aligns with and upholds these regulatory obligations without compromising the intended business functionality. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and integrated strategy for data privacy and security within the IBM Case Manager v5. 1. Implementation. This means conducting a thorough data protection impact assessment (DPIA) early in the project lifecycle. A DPIA is a systematic process to identify and minimize the data protection risks of a project or plan. For IBM Case Manager, this would involve scrutinizing how PII and sensitive data are collected, stored, processed, accessed, and retained within the case management solution. It necessitates defining clear data minimization principles, implementing robust access controls, encryption where appropriate, and establishing audit trails. This approach directly addresses regulatory requirements by embedding privacy by design and privacy by default principles, ensuring compliance with data protection laws by proactively identifying and mitigating risks before they materialize. This aligns with the spirit and letter of regulations that mandate responsible data handling. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to defer data privacy considerations until after the IBM Case Manager v5. One solution has been deployed. This reactive stance is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It violates the principle of privacy by design, which requires data protection to be a core consideration from the outset. Such a delay increases the likelihood of non-compliance, as retrofitting security and privacy controls into a live system is often complex, costly, and may not fully address the initial design flaws. This can lead to breaches of data protection laws, resulting in fines and legal action. Another incorrect approach is to assume that standard IBM Case Manager v5 security features are sufficient without specific configuration and validation against relevant data protection regulations. While IBM Case Manager offers security capabilities, these are often generic. Regulatory compliance, particularly concerning PII and sensitive data, requires tailored configurations, specific access role definitions, and potentially additional security measures that go beyond out-of-the-box functionality. Relying solely on default settings without a regulatory-specific assessment is a failure to exercise due diligence and can result in unintentional noncompliance, exposing the organization to risks. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with implementing IBM Case Manager v5 must adopt a risk-based, compliance-first mindset. The decision-making process should prioritize understanding the specific data protection regulations applicable to the organization's operations and the types of data being handled. This involves engaging with legal and compliance teams early and continuously throughout the project. The implementation plan should explicitly incorporate data privacy requirements, including conducting a DPIA, defining data handling policies, and configuring the system to meet these standards. Regular reviews and audits of the implemented solution against regulatory requirements are crucial. This proactive and integrated approach ensures that the technology serves the business objectives while upholding legal and ethical obligations, thereby safeguarding the organization and its stakeholders. Question 15. Comparative studies suggest that organizations implementing IBM Case Manager v5 often face challenges in balancing efficient case processing with robust data privacy. When dealing with sensitive customer information within case files, which of the following approaches best adheres to regulatory compliance and professional data stewardship principles? Option A. Grant all users full access to all case data to ensure no information is inadvertently withheld during processing. Option B. Establish strict access controls but forego regular auditing of user activity to avoid administrative overhead. Option C. Enable all security features within IBM Case Manager to prevent any possibility of unauthorized access, even if it significantly hinders case processing speed. Option D. Implement role-based access controls (RBAC) and utilize data masking for sensitive fields when not actively required for case resolution. The correct answer is D. Implement role-based access controls (RBAC) and utilize data masking for sensitive fields when not actively required for case resolution. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in managing sensitive customer data within an IBM Case Manager v5 environment, specifically concerning regulatory compliance. Core difficulty lies in balancing the need for efficient case processing with the stringent requirements of data privacy regulations. Organizations must implement robust controls to prevent unauthorized access and disclosure of personally identifiable information (PI), while ensuring that authorized personnel can perform their duties effectively. Failure to do so can result in significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. The complexity arises from the distributed nature of case data, potential for human error, and the need for continuous monitoring and auditing. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves implementing role-based access controls (RBAC) within IBM Case Manager, coupled with data masking or anonymization techniques for sensitive fields when not directly required for case resolution. This aligns with the principle of least privilege, ensuring that users only have access to the data and functionalities necessary for their specific roles. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing data protection, e.g., GDPR if the jurisdiction were EU, or relevant U.S. state laws if U.S., mandate that organizations protect PII. RBAC directly addresses this by limiting exposure. Data masking further enhances protection by obscuring sensitive information from users who do not have a legitimate business need to see it, thereby minimizing the risk of accidental or intentional data breaches. This proactive and layered security strategy is considered best professional practice as it directly mitigates identified risks and demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance and data stewardship. Incorrect approaches analysis. Granting broad access to all case data for all users, regardless of their role, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach violates the principle of least privilege and exposes PII to a wider audience than necessary, increasing the risk of unauthorized access, misuse, or accidental disclosure. Such a practice would likely contravene data protection regulations that require organizations to implement appropriate technical and organizational measures to ensure data security. Implementing strict access controls but failing to audit user activity creates another regulatory and ethical vulnerability. While access might be restricted, the lack of auditing means that any potential breaches or misuse of data by authorized users would go undetected. This failure to monitor and audit is a common pitfall that can lead to non-compliance with regulations, requiring accountability and oversight of data handling processes. It also hinders the ability to investigate incidents and demonstrate due diligence in the event of a security incident. Disabling all security features within IBM Case Manager to simplify case management processes is a severe regulatory and ethical breach. This action completely disregards data protection obligations and exposes the organization to extreme risk of data breaches, identity theft, and significant legal and financial repercussions. It demonstrates a blatant disregard for customer privacy and regulatory requirements, leading to severe penalties and irreparable damage to the organization's reputation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach data security and regulatory compliance in IBM Case Manager by first understanding the specific data types being handled and the relevant regulatory obligations. A risk assessment should be conducted to identify potential vulnerabilities. The principle of least privilege should guide the design of access controls, ensuring that roles and permissions are granular and aligned with business functions. Implementing RBAC is a foundational step. Furthermore, data protection measures such as encryption and data masking should be considered for sensitive information. Continuous monitoring, regular security audits, and user activity logging are crucial for detecting and responding to potential security incidents and ensuring ongoing compliance. A proactive, risk-based approach that prioritizes data protection and adheres to regulatory mandates is essential for maintaining trust and avoiding legal liabilities. Question 16. Compliance review shows that a critical IBM Case Manager v5.1 implementation for a financial services firm is being rushed to meet a market launch deadline. The project team is considering deploying the solution with placeholder security configurations for sensitive customer financial data, planning to refine them post-launch. The firm operates under strict financial data protection regulations, which approach best balances the need for timely deployment with regulatory adherence. Option A. Implement the solution with robust, predefined security configurations for sensitive data, even if it requires a slight delay to the launch, and conduct thorough testing before go live. Option B. Deploy the solution with placeholder security configurations and immediately initiate a post-launch project to implement the full security framework. Option C. Deploy the solution with basic security controls and delegate the responsibility of ensuring data protection to individual caseworkers. Option D. Prioritize the launch by deploying with minimal security controls and rely on post-implementation audits to identify and rectify any compliance gaps. Correct answer is A. Implement the solution with robust, predefined security configurations for sensitive data, even if it requires a slight delay to the launch, and conduct thorough testing before go live. Explanation. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in enterprise content management systems, where the need for rapid deployment clashes with the imperative to adhere to established data governance and security protocols. The challenge lies in balancing business agility with regulatory compliance, particularly concerning the handling of sensitive customer data with an IBM case manager. The core difficulty is ensuring that the implemented solution, while meeting business objectives, does not inadvertently create compliance risks or introduce vulnerabilities. The correct approach prioritizes a phased implementation that integrates security and compliance checks at each stage. This aligns with best professional practice by embedding regulatory adherence into the development lifecycle, rather than treating it as an afterthought. Specifically, it ensures that data classification, access controls, and audit logging are configured according to the defined policies before and during the migration of sensitive data. This proactive stance minimizes the risk of data breaches, unauthorized access, and noncompliance with data protection regulations, which are critical for maintaining customer trust and avoiding legal repercussions. An incorrect approach that bypasses or defers critical security and compliance configurations during the initial deployment is professionally unacceptable. This could lead to immediate or latent regulatory failures. For instance, failing to implement proper data masking or encryption for sensitive fields before data migration directly violates data privacy regulations, exposing the organization to significant fines and reputational damage. Similarly, neglecting to configure granular access controls based on user roles and data sensitivity creates a high risk of unauthorized access and data misuse, contravening principles of data stewardship and security best practices. Another incorrect approach might involve relying solely on post-implementation audits to identify compliance gaps. While audits are necessary, this reactive strategy is insufficient, as it allows non-compliant states to exist for a period, increasing the potential for breaches and regulatory scrutiny. The professional reasoning process for navigating such a challenge involves a risk-based assessment. This means identifying potential compliance risks early in the project, prioritizing mitigation strategies based on their impact and likelihood, and integrating these strategies into the project plan. Key considerations include understanding the specific data types being handled, the relevant regulatory requirements, e.g., GDPR, CCPA, HIPAA, depending on the jurisdiction, and the capabilities of IBM Case Manager to enforce these requirements. A collaborative approach involving business stakeholders, IT security, legal, and compliance teams is essential to ensure all perspectives are considered and that the implemented solution is both functional and compliant. Question 17. To address the challenge of updating a critical business process in IBM Case Manager v5, one to comply with new regulatory mandates, which approach best ensures both effective compliance and minimal operational disruption. Option A. Conduct a thorough impact analysis, including technical feasibility, regulatory alignment, and operational workflow assessment, followed by a pilot implementation and user training before full deployment. Option B. Prioritize the solution that offers the lowest immediate cost, regardless of its long-term impact or thoroughness in meeting all regulatory nuances. Option C. Focus solely on the technical aspects of the solution, ensuring it can be deployed within the IBM Case Manager v5. One framework, without extensive consideration of business process integration or user impact. Option D. Immediately implement the proposed solution to ensure prompt regulatory compliance, assuming it addresses the core requirements. Correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough impact analysis, including technical feasibility, regulatory alignment, and operational workflow assessment, followed by a pilot implementation and user training before full deployment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. The scenario presents a common challenge in case management where a critical business process needs to be updated to comply with new regulatory requirements. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for compliance with the potential impact on existing case processing, user adoption, and system stability. A hasty or poorly considered decision could lead to non-compliance, operational disruptions, or significant rework. The need for a structured decision-making framework is paramount to ensure all relevant factors are considered. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic evaluation of the proposed solution against established criteria. This includes assessing its technical feasibility within the IBM Case Manager v5, 1. Environment, its alignment with the specific regulatory mandates, and its potential impact on operational workflows and user experience. A thorough impact analysis, including risk assessment and a pilot testing phase, is crucial. This methodical approach ensures that the chosen solution is not only compliant but also practical, efficient, and minimizes disruption. It aligns with best practices in change management and regulatory compliance, emphasizing due diligence and risk mitigation. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing the solution immediately without proper validation or testing represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach bypasses essential steps for ensuring the solution effectively meets the regulatory requirements and does not introduce unintended negative consequences. It could lead to continued noncompliance or operational errors, exposing the organization to penalties and reputational damage. Focusing solely on the technical implementation without considering the business process impact or user adoption is another failure. While the technical aspect might be addressed, the solution may not be effectively integrated into daily operations, leading to workarounds or user resistance, thereby undermining the intended compliance and efficiency gains. Prioritizing the cheapest or quickest solution without a comprehensive evaluation of its effectiveness and long-term implications is also professionally unsound. This can lead to a superficial fix that does not truly address the regulatory requirements or creates future technical debt, ultimately costing more in the long run and risking compliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the problem and the regulatory context. This involves gathering all necessary information, identifying potential solutions, and evaluating each solution against predefined criteria such as compliance, feasibility, impact, and cost. A risk assessment and a pilot or phased rollout are essential steps to validate the chosen solution before full deployment. This iterative and evidence-based approach ensures that decisions are well-informed, defensible, and lead to successful outcomes. Question 18. Compliance review shows that a financial institution is implementing IBM Case Manager v5. 1. To streamline its customer onboarding process. To ensure regulatory adherence and operational integrity, the compliance officer needs to conduct a risk assessment. Which of the following approaches best balances thoroughness with efficiency and regulatory expectations for this new system implementation? Option A. Initiate a phased risk assessment, starting with high-level identification of potential risks based on the system's intended use and integrations, followed by detailed analysis of the most significant risks. Option B. Develop a generic risk register based on common IT risks and apply it directly to the IBM Case Manager v5. 1. Implementation without specific contextual analysis. Option C. Conduct a detailed, component-by-component risk assessment of every configuration setting within IBM Case Manager v5. 1. Before any deployment activities begin. Option D. Implement IBM Case Manager v5. 1. First and then conduct a risk assessment once the system is fully operational and has been used for a period. The correct answer is C. Conduct a detailed component-by-component risk assessment of every configuration setting within IBM Case Manager v5. 1. Before any deployment activities begin. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in risk assessment within regulated environments, balancing the need for comprehensive risk identification with the practical constraints of resource allocation and the potential for analysis paralysis. The compliance officer must determine the most effective and compliant method for identifying and prioritizing risks associated with a new IBM Case Manager v5. 1. Implementation. Ensuring that all relevant regulatory requirements are met without becoming bogged down in an overly granular or inefficient process. The challenge lies in selecting an approach that is both thorough enough to satisfy regulatory scrutiny and efficient enough to be actionable. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased risk assessment that begins with a high-level identification of potential risks based on the specific functionalities and integrations of the IBM Case Manager v5. 1. Solution, followed by a more detailed analysis of the most significant risks. This aligns with best practices in risk management and regulatory compliance by first identifying broad categories of risk, e.g., data security, operational disruption, regulatory noncompliance, and then drilling down into specific threats and vulnerabilities within those categories. the assessment remains focused and manageable. This phased approach allows for the efficient allocation of resources, prioritizing deeper investigation into risks that pose the greatest potential impact and likelihood. It also ensures that the assessment is tailored to the specific context of the IBM Case Manager v5.1 implementation, rather than relying on generic checklists that may not capture unique risks. This methodology supports a proactive and systematic approach to risk management, which is a key expectation of regulatory bodies overseeing financial services or other sensitive industries. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to conduct an exhaustive, granular risk assessment of every single component and configuration option with an IBM Case Manager v5.1 from the outset. This is professionally unacceptable because it is highly inefficient, time-consuming, and prone to analysis paralysis. It fails to prioritize effectively and may lead to the identification of numerous minor risks while overlooking more significant ones due to the sheer volume of detail. From a regulatory perspective, while thoroughness is valued, an unmanageable and unfocused assessment can be seen as a failure to implement a practical and effective risk management framework. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on a generic predefined risk register that is not tailored to the specific implementation of IBM Case Manager v5.1. This is professionally unsound because it ignores the unique context, integrations, and potential vulnerabilities of the deployed solution. Regulatory bodies expect risk assessments to be specific to the systems and processes being reviewed. A generic approach risks missing critical, context-specific risks, leading to potential noncompliance and operational failures. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence in understanding the actual risk landscape. A third incorrect approach is to defer risk assessment until after the IBM Case Manager v5.1 solution has been fully deployed and is in production. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Risk assessment should be an integral part of the system development lifecycle, ideally starting during the planning and design phases. Post-deployment assessment is reactive rather than proactive, increasing the likelihood of significant incidents occurring before risks are identified and mitigated. This approach demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of risk management principles and regulatory expectations for proactive control environments. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based, phased approach to risk assessment. This involves 1. Understanding the scope and objectives of the IBM Case Manager v5.1 implementation. 2. Conducting an initial high-level identification of potential risk categories relevant to the system and its operational context. 3. Prioritizing these categories based on potential impact and likelihood. 4. Performing detailed risk analysis and mitigation planning for the highest priority risks. 5. Regularly reviewing and updating the risk assessment as the system evolves or the threat landscape changes. This structured, iterative process ensures that resources are used effectively, risks are managed proactively, and regulatory requirements are met with a practical and robust framework. Question 19. System analysis indicates that a financial services firm is implementing IBM Case Manager v5.1 to manage customer complaints. The firm operates under strict financial regulations that mandate comprehensive audit trails for all access and modifications to customer data, as well as granular role-based access controls to prevent unauthorized disclosure of sensitive information. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with these regulatory requirements during the implementation of IBM Case Manager v5.1? Option A. Assume that the out-of-the-box audit capabilities of IBM Case Manager v5.1 are sufficient without specific configuration and that standard user permissions will adequately protect sensitive data. Option B. Prioritize the speed of deployment and user adoption by disabling certain audit logging features that are perceived as overly burdensome and granting broader access privileges to facilitate quicker case resolution. Option C. Deploy IBM Case Manager v5.1 with default security settings and rely on existing network firewalls to protect sensitive customer data from external threats. Option D. Configure IBM Case Manager v5.1 to enable detailed audit logging for all user actions and implement role-based access controls that strictly limit access to case data based on job function, ensuring that only necessary information is visible to each role. The correct answer is D. Configure IBM Case Manager v5.1 One, to enable detailed audit logging for all user actions and implement role-based access controls that strictly limit access to case data based on job function, ensuring that only necessary information is visible to each role. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in regulated industries where the implementation of new technology, like IBM Case Manager v5, 1. Must strictly adhere to existing data privacy and security regulations. The core challenge lies in balancing the functional benefits of the case management system with the imperative to protect sensitive customer information, particularly when dealing with data that may be subject to specific jurisdictional requirements. A failure to properly configure and deploy the system can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. The need for a robust audit trail and access control mechanisms is paramount, as these are frequently scrutinized by regulatory bodies. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of IBM Case Manager v5, one's security and audit logging capabilities against the specific requirements of the relevant regulatory framework. This includes understanding how the system can be configured to enforce granular access controls, ensuring that only authorized personnel can view or modify sensitive case data. Furthermore, it necessitates the implementation of robust audit trails that capture all significant actions performed within the system, providing an irrefutable record for compliance verification. This approach aligns with the principles of data minimization, purpose limitation, and accountability, which are foundational to most data protection regulations. By proactively designing the system to meet these requirements, the organization demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to regulatory compliance. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing IBM Case Manager v5, one without a thorough understanding of its audit logging and access control features, and assuming default configurations are sufficient, represents a significant regulatory failure. This approach risks creating blind spots in data governance, where unauthorized access or data breaches could go undetected. It also fails to meet the explicit requirements of many regulations that mandate specific levels of auditability and access restriction for sensitive data. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize system functionality and user convenience over strict adherence to security and audit requirements. This might involve enabling broader access than necessary or disabling certain audit features to simplify user workflows. Such a decision directly contravenes the principles of data protection by increasing the risk of unauthorized disclosure or modification of sensitive information, and it would likely be flagged as a serious deficiency during a regulatory audit. Finally, relying solely on external security measures, such as network firewalls, without configuring the internal security controls within IBM Case Manager v5, one itself is insufficient. While network security is important, it does not address the internal risks associated with user access and data handling within the application. Regulations typically require controls at multiple layers, including application-level security, to ensure comprehensive data protection. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with implementing regulated systems like IBM Case Manager v5, one must adopt a risk-based approach. This involves identifying all relevant regulatory obligations, understanding the capabilities and limitations of the chosen technology, and designing the system to proactively mitigate compliance risks. A key decision-making framework involves the privacy by design and security by design principles, which advocate for embedding privacy and security considerations into the system development lifecycle from the outset. This requires close collaboration between IT, legal, compliance, and business stakeholders to ensure that all requirements are met. Regular reviews and updates to configurations based on evolving regulations and system usage are also critical components of ongoing compliance. Question 20. The control framework reveals that a critical business process within the IBM Case Manager v5, one solution requires integration with a third-party customer data management system. This integration is essential for real-time data synchronization to support case resolution. However, the third-party system has limited documentation regarding its security protocols. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure regulatory compliance and data security? Option A. Conduct a thorough security assessment of the integration points, including data encryption in transit and at rest, access controls, and audit logging, and ensure adherence to relevant U.S. federal regulations and NIST guidelines before proceeding with the integration. Option B. Implement the integration with basic password protection, assuming the third-party system's internal security is sufficient. Option C. Proceed with the integration immediately, relying on the vendor's verbal assurances of security to meet the business process deadline. Option D. Recommend abandoning the integration and reverting to manual data entry to avoid any potential security risks. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough security assessment of the integration points, including data encryption in transit and at rest, access controls and audit logging, and ensure adherence to relevant U.S. federal regulations and NIST guidelines before proceeding with the integration. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in case management, where a business process requires integration with external systems. The professional challenge lies in ensuring that the integration, while functional, adheres strictly to the security and data privacy regulations mandated by the relevant jurisdiction, which for this exam is assumed to be U.S. federal regulations governing financial services, such as GLBA and SOX, and relevant NIST guidelines for secure system integration. The need to balance operational efficiency with regulatory compliance requires careful consideration of data handling, access controls, and audit trails. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough security review and adherence to established secure integration patterns. This aligns with best professional practice by prioritizing data protection and regulatory compliance. Specifically, it ensures that sensitive customer data is encrypted both in transit and at rest, access is strictly controlled and logged, and the integration points are regularly audited for vulnerabilities. This proactive stance minimizes the risk of data breaches and regulatory penalties, upholding the principles of data integrity and confidentiality as required by GLBA and SOX. The use of secure APIs and adherence to NIST guidelines for secure system development and integration are paramount. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to proceed with the integration without a formal security review, relying solely on the vendor's assurances. This fails to meet the due diligence requirements mandated by regulations like GLBA, which requires financial institutions to protect customer information. It also violates the principles of secure system development outlined in NIST guidelines, creating a significant vulnerability. Another incorrect approach would be to implement the integration with minimal security controls, prioritizing speed of deployment over robust protection. This directly contravenes the spirit and letter of SOX, which mandates internal controls to prevent fraud and ensure financial reporting accuracy, and GLBA requirement for safeguarding customer data. Such an approach creates an unacceptable risk of unauthorized access and data compromise. A third incorrect approach would be to bypass the integration entirely due to perceived complexity, opting for manual data transfer. While seemingly safe, this can lead to data entry errors, inefficiencies, and a lack of auditable trails, indirectly impacting financial reporting accuracy, SOX, and potentially leading to compliance issues if data is mishandled during the manual process. It also fails to leverage the capabilities of IBM Case Manager for process optimization. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach. This involves identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities, assessing their impact, and implementing controls to mitigate them. When integrating systems, especially those handling sensitive data, a comprehensive security assessment is non-negotiable. This assessment should include evaluating the security posture of the external system, defining clear data exchange protocols, implementing robust authentication and authorization mechanisms, and establishing comprehensive logging and monitoring. Adherence to industry best practices and regulatory requirements should guide every step of the integration process.